My culture of this country is kind of a humble culture, which means that if we see a pastor who looks wealthy, we don't trust him. We see that there's something wrong. If the pastor has an expensive car, for instance, we say, no, that's not the real pastor. There's something wrong here. There's something suspicious. People will not follow wealthy pastors in this country.
I'm Efiwana, and welcome to the WAKEup Concept. I'm excited to have with me here Mr. Timo Keskitalo to have a conversation about church and the state of Finland as it relates to tax and about tithing in the church. We are privileged to have him here, in large part because he is the chairperson at the Finnish Mission Council, University of Helsinki, a member of the board of the Evangelical Alliance in Finland, and also the presiding pastor of the International Evangelical Church here in Finland. Religious-based financial fraud is rampant in Africa and growing by the so-called men of God, and this is often leading to avoidable suffering of citizens. Today we are going to explore not only his thinking about all of this, but also he will share with us how everything church is run and managed here in Finland. So please help me to welcome Mr. Keskitalo. Welcome to this conversation, sir. What is the relationship between the church and the Finnish state?
May I go back in history?
Please do.
Finland was Christianized within this kingdom, but then we go further on to time of Reformation, like 16th century. Then the Reformation came to Sweden and to Finland as well, and it was seen favorably by the king of Sweden. Maybe for false reasons, but it was a political issue partly. And then the Swedish king saw the opportunity to grab the treasures of the Roman Catholic Church and monasteries and so on. And so he allowed Finland as well to be reformed. And so Finland became majority Lutheran that time. It took another 200 years really to separate the state and the church. But already that was a step. When the king took the wealth of the Catholic Church, it was kind of separation of the church and state in a way. And then further, during the 18th century, the local municipalities were run by the church until then. They were like parishes instead of municipality. But then it was decided, no, actually it was in early 1900s when church had its own legislation, and it was approved by the parliament, but the parliament could not change anything in the church orders. Parliament could also only say yes or no to the legislation done by the church itself. So that was more, again, one more step in separation. That's where we are now, still in Finland, with the church and state. There are certain arrangements with money between state and church. But the two are, in principle, they are independent from each other, not meddling with the affairs of each other.
Wow.
I say in principle, because in people's minds, they still get mixed. But as it is in the governing and in the law and in the finances, they are separate and independent.
People like us are trying to, ask these questions like, what is exactly the role of money is playing in churches today, most especially in Africa? So if I may ask you, so how does the tax system work here then in Finland as related to the church?
Yeah. There is a thing called church tax in Finland. And it is an arrangement between two denominations in the country and the state, the Lutheran Church and the Orthodox Church. So it's not all Christian churches. It's these two like historical churches of Finland that have this system. It is basically it's like this, that the state collects membership tax from the members of the Lutheran Church and the Orthodox Church, from the members of these two churches, and then gives this money, so collected, to these churches, but takes a fee from collecting. And the church tax is not decided by the state. The state decides about all the other taxes, but not the church membership tax. That is decided by the church council, the local church council. So, for instance, I live in a small place in the countryside, and so there is a church council, and each year they decide what will be the membership tax this year. Across Finland, it is between 1% and 2%. That's the rate now. But it is decided by local council. They could decide it's 5% or 10%, but they are calculating and thinking, oh, if we raise it too much, we will lose members because of money. So they are thinking cleverly, okay, let's keep it low and down. And as far as the church membership, now I'm speaking about Lutheran Church, is something like 70% or around there, this 1% or 2% may be a lot of money. It is sufficient to finance everything in the church. And so the local church then makes decisions how to use the money, and the decision making is transparent. Everybody in the area can go and see how the money is used. So it's all reported and transparent, but it sounds like a good system, right?
Yeah.
But there's a downside as well.
Okay, I would like to know the downside. Please open it up a bit.
The downside is that since so many people are still members of the church, although they are not practicing Christians, but because of tradition, they're still members of the church, and they are willing to pay this rather low 1% or 2%. That means that the church is gaining a lot of money in a very easy way. And that means that the church is quite wealthy. And when there's wealth, there's problem. And the problem is that people are eager to make decisions about how to use this money. And those people who want to decide about money are not necessarily those who are active in the church. They are just active with the money, decision making.
Yeah.
That is the downside. So we see this thing in Finland that electing the church council members is seen as a trial ground or playground for political parties to test their potential future candidates. Which is not really what the church is for, but the political parties are using it for that. So they see a young person or somebody in the area who is maybe known by a number of people and say, okay, go and try to be elected in the church council. So the church has election for the council members, and political parties are pushing their candidates, and if they get a lot of votes, then they will be candidates in the municipal elections and the parliament elections as well, because they are tested here. And that means that these people who never come to church are in the council deciding how the money is used. That is a negative side of this. So every system has a positive and negative side, and this is the negative side of this. So when they are deciding also about things like who is going to be the next pastor serving the church, or how we emphasize the ministry of the church, they might not have the gospel in their in front of their mind, but something else. They might be interested in how the church owns some land property or buildings, or how to use this or that thing for their ideologies. and not for Christianity.
But what I'm hearing from you, it sound more to me that politicians and government are well involved in church finances and allocation, and then also decision making, right? So it's not a question where you have individuals or pastor like you deciding that, okay, this is money is my church, and I'm going to decide how it's used, right?
The pastor usually decides how the church building is used, for what kind of functions. That is his authority.
Okay.
But how to use the money? No, he does not decide.
He doesn't decide.
No.
Exactly.
And he does not decide about his salary, for sure.
That's very important to know. So, so basically, the pastor himself has a fixed salary, right? That is decided by who?
It is decided by the church council. There are kind of national agreements about the pay rate, but the smaller definition of that refining is done by the local council.
Wow, this is really important information you're giving, and that is why I thought this is really good to bring you in to actually educate us on this, because if you take in Africa, right, like we started off, these pastors, the so-called pastors, they collect money from churches, from individuals, and then they decide however they use it. And then they say that this is my money, I did this, I give that money, everything is I am I, and this, to my sort of understanding, is causing a lot of problem in the society, avoidable suffering for innocent citizens that of course think that each time they are giving money, that they are giving it to God, not knowing that they are actually giving it to individual.
Yeah, it becomes like an enterprise.
Exactly. So so churches in large part in Africa has been sort of it's a lucrative sort of business now for people there, and this is something that we think that it's not it's not a good thing.
There are many aspects here.
Yeah.
One aspect is about people's expectation and values. My culture of this country is kind of a humble culture, which means that if we see a pastor who looks wealthy, we don't trust him. We see that there's something wrong. If the pastor has an expensive car, for instance, we say, no, that's not the real pastor. There's something wrong here. There's something suspicious. People will not follow wealthy pastors in this country.
Yeah.
And that's the mindset of people. That's a culture. And I think that maybe in many African contexts, when you see somebody is wealthy, you think that person is successful, I will follow him. And that's a different mindset.
Yeah.
I think we should try to find a balance here of critical thinking, that if somebody is grabbing money to himself, we need to ask him to be responsible for that. How he is using the money. That's one aspect. And maybe we are too critical in our country. We do not allow a Christian to be rich.
Yeah.
And of course, Christians should be allowed to be rich as well and successful in life. That should be a possibility. But a church should not gather wealth for itself, and especially not for its leaders. Another aspect here is that when there's this church membership tax, it does not really encourage people to give. And I think that's sad. We should allow people to give, and give in plenty. And if people are expected only to give and not even think about it, it's taken from your salary, without you knowing, this 1 to 2%, it is not giving people opportunity to share from their wealth. And this is something that is much better in Nigeria or other African countries. People are encouraged to give. That's positive. That's good. then again, in churches in this country where this giving is happening, and we're teaching 10% tithing, this kind of giving, which is biblical and right. It shouldn't be a law and demand, I think, but it should be encouraged. But normally, as a pastor, I do not know who is giving and what. Because that's another trap. When the pastor knows that, oh, so-and-so is giving so much money, then when so-and-so is coming to the pastor and saying that, I would like things to be done this way, the pastor will follow and obey. Because this person gives so much.
Gives money.
Money speaks. But it would be so much better if the pastor does not know who's giving and what. So in the years of serving as a pastor in the church where it is dependent on free will donations and offerings and giving, I never knew who was giving.
Wow.
I never knew. And I think that's a healthy principle.
You open this a little bit. Now that you mentioned about this, people giving money without knowing and probably deducting it from salaries without even people, obviously, or most correctly, people that doesn't even go to church or doesn't even believe in Christianity. But the state also take away some certain percentage of...
Yeah, state takes about 1% as a kind of collecting fee for this, and that's enough for the state.
So how does that work? Is it through salaries, or could you,
it is deducted from your salaries. Like when you get your salary, monthly salary, it's not the whole salary anymore. Tax has been taken away from it, including the church membership tax. It's already taken before you see it. That's how it works here.
Yeah. But do you think then that that money is used for a good cause?
Okay.
Because that's the difference.
Yes.
You're collecting money, understanding how the money is taken from people, and then also how the money is used, right? So, what's your take on that?
And now I'm speaking again about Lutheran Church, the majority church in this country. Yeah. Lutheran Church is using the money mainly for salaries, employing people. Local church has lots paid staff, and then after that the big amounts of money go to running the cemeteries. That's a big cost, and buildings. But those are the three major expenses for the church. But in our local church, the salary costs are about 80% of the expenditure. Earlier in my career, I take this example of the numbers and how it's divided. It was the Lutheran Church in a city of 20,000 people.
Okay.
So in Nigerian terms, a small village.
Yeah.
We call this a small city.
Yeah.
So, 20,000 people living in the area, in the town, and about 18,000 of them being members of the church and paying the church tax, membership tax. That local church had 50 paid workers, 50.
Yeah.
In one local church, 50 people working there, most of them full time. And so we were, I think, 5 pastors. Then about 10 people working in the cemetery, people working with children in the office, and different kind of youth workers of different capacities. 50 people altogether. On Sunday in church, we had about 200 people. And that was considered as a lively, good church. But when you think about it, if each one of the paid workers of the church would come to church with a spouse and 2 children, that would be it.
Yeah.
200.
200, yeah. Wow.
But I must confess that, again, self-criticism. I must confess that I didn't go to church unless I was on duty. I learned to really attend the church much later in my life. But as a young pastor, I was in church on Sunday maybe twice a month. when I was serving in some capacity.
Yeah.
On Sundays, I would go fishing.
Mm.
Or to another church. Yeah, sometimes.
But you know, like you just mentioned, you know, they emphasize more of, you know, coming to church, not just only on Sunday, even weekdays.
Exactly.
It's part of.
It's good.
Yeah, that is. This is how you should do it, and other, like if you don't, it's considered as, you know, not being responsible and not being a good Christian and all of that. But stealing, doing other kind of immoral things, no one talks about that.
Right.
So, but how do you relate that now with what is happening today? Because you can see that also a lot of, or if you like, the new generations in this, or let me not say that. I think the attendance of churches, most especially here in Finland, hasn't been like really growing. Or what do you think?
It's not growing in any church really.
Okay.
Yeah. In the population in general, church attendance is going down slowly. And church membership is going down slowly. There are a couple of branches of Christianity which are growing. One is I would say kind of Bible-believing Lutheran kind of separatist kind of church branch is growing, which is not gaining this church tax at all, but totally dependent on the free gifts. So that is growing, and immigrant churches, especially African churches, are growing.
Exactly.
Those two branches of church are growing here, and so we need to learn from those which are strong and growing. And so even though this church membership tax is convenient and easy, it's also a trap. If it could be run in a very good way in a spiritual environment, it would be good.
Much more beneficial, you think? Yeah.
It would be beneficial, but if it's attracting people who want to just control the money, then it's not good.
Okay. Now that you mentioned that, let's come back a bit to the issue of tithing inside the church.
Okay.
Now, does Finnish church, how does it work? Do they collect tithes, and how is this used if they do collect tithes?
Yeah. First, I want to say that from the tax money or membership money, the church is using that for social work as well, like helping the poor and feeding the hungry and giving some money for mission and so on. But that money is really, really small in the total. It's like 3%, 4% is of the total is used for this kind of aid purposes. But there's offering collected, even in Lutheran church. Every Sunday offering is collected. But that money is very small. People they have not learned and they are not taught to give. They are not taught to give tithing 10% normally in Lutheran church. There's lack of teaching in giving. But the giving is done through voluntary organizations or independent mission organizations, evangelistic organizations. And when the offerings are collected in the church on Sunday, that money is usually given to these organizations. Organizations doing social work or evangelism or mission. And so, for instance, if there's some money coming, let's say to Nigeria, coming from Finland through certain missions, that is probably given by people on Sunday in the church to the offering, and since it is collected from the whole country, the amount is still considerable, although in a local church it might be very small. And so that's the normal situation. But then there are churches which are not using this church tax membership thing, and they are totally dependent on members giving on Sunday to the offering.
So continue.
And then we have also teaching that that 10% is a good guideline for giving. And people are encouraged to give more than 10% if they want to. But there's no like follow up who's giving and who's not. That's not done. But the teaching is there in those churches that are dependent on giving. And often I notice that people coming from outside of Finland, from Asian countries or African countries, or even from North America, they know how to give. And as you know, I was serving for almost 15 years in an international church in Helsinki as a pastor. I was just amazed at the amount of offerings we were getting. And in the Finnish churches, they were envious because we had so big offerings on Sunday, and it was possible to employ people from the offerings, which is not often the case in Finnish churches. They cannot employ anybody based on the offerings. But we could.
Who then decide how these tithes and offerings in the church
are used?
It
is still the church council.
Okay.
Even in those churches which are not using the church tax, it is the church council which decides. And they are like meeting usually like every month and following the situation and the income and the expenditure. They are making the budget, and then that is submitted to the meeting of the members. So all the church members are welcome once a year to look how the council has done it and see what the end result was of last year and what they are planning for this year. And then the members are saying that, no, we don't like this or we like this, and then the changes are made. So there's this kind of responsibility in front of every member.
The most important thing about this discussion that we're having is actually understanding how the role of states and church in Finland, individuals, perpetuating fraud as a way of making money through church. So that is obviously like something that I want our viewers to understand. This is handled in some cases by the church council. So no one pastor dare to say this is the money we receive and this is how we're going to use it. So it doesn't happen. It doesn't happen that way. Is that right?
That's right.
Exactly. And now I want to ask you, when you hear that churches in Africa and pastors and people are like, they are taking advantage of people that believe that when they give money, that they are giving it to God, and then this same money is used by individual pastors that call themselves men of God for their own private use. They go about buying expensive stuff, about I'm having 3 private jets, I'm having this, I'm having that, in the midst of people suffering. Government doesn't even have any influence on how finances are managed, how it's being used, and that's the problem. How does that make you feel when you hear things like this?
Yeah,
as a Christian,
it is sad. I mean, it is not good testimony about Christian faith. We should show in our behavior and in our managing of money as well that we are Christian, and that is not showing Christian values. It was always a principle in international church that when we got money from the tithe and the offering, that we would dedicate again as a church 10% of that to give out for mission. So in addition to that, we kind of cared for the poor and this kind of things, but 10% would be always sent out from our church. So we get tithe from the members, and then as a church we tithe again to give out for mission outside of our own functioning. So that is a principle, and but this is partly a question of values and culture. But I must say that I would feel ashamed to use expensive clothing, and members of the church seeing that. I would feel ashamed. And it takes a different way of thinking to show your wealth as a pastor. And I want to challenge that way of thinking, to question it, is that right? And I think it's not only a question of different culture, it is also a testimony. What I know is happening is that some of the African big denominations are actually sending money here to European countries to establish churches here, which is great. I mean, it's like mission from Africa to Europe. This is what Europeans did and still do in Africa. They're sending money to Africa to establish churches there. Now it is happening mainly the other way around, that African churches are sending money to establish churches here, for instance in Finland. And when the church gets up and running and it is okay, then money also goes back, which is not bad. I think it's fair in a way.
Yeah, I think my problem with that the money that goes back doesn't go to the Africans themselves.
Yeah.
It goes to individual pockets. It goes to the so-called pastors, and then also the money that comes to Europe from Africa doesn't come. That money is actually the money that is being collected from the poor in Africa to build church in Europe. One might think, like, what sense does that make? Because there's still a lot of poverty, there's a lot of pain, there's a lot of... So if they now think that it's a good idea to go and start building churches in Europe and sending the money that is actually collected from the poor people, because the reason why this is important is because the bare minimum of what every human being need is still lacking in Africa. If you think about just the basic stuff, affordable housing, access to clean drinking water, you think about education, security, right? Even moving from point A to point B, all these things are basic stuff, and it's still a heck of a problem there. And these same people, they collect money from these poor people that are giving out money thinking that they are giving to God, and then they bring the money back to Europe in the name of building churches. I mean, it doesn't really see. This money can be used in financing some of these social issues that we're having, building schools. And could you believe that some of the schools that are being built by the so-called churches in Africa is run in a way that even the poor people cannot even attend those schools? So what's your take? I mean, how does that sound to you? Because these are the issues.
I think all empire building in the Christian circles is sad. That is the sad thing, that if the money goes back to the pockets of the rich and wealthy, power-grabbing pastors who are building their own empires.
That's what it is.
That is sad. But at the same time, I must say that I rejoice by the African churches being established in Europe. And I said, we need it. In Europe, we need evangelism, re-evangelizing European countries. That is needed. And I believe that as the African population in Europe keeps their faith, they will be sending their private funds to their extended family members and financing the schooling of the poor, and that is a major that money is bigger than any government aids from wealthy Western countries. The money sent by African families in Europe, and I think that if they keep their faith, they also keep their value of helping the poor in the families. That's the best kind of foreign aid that there can be. So I think that we need the input of African Christians in European societies in Finland as well. So we need the African churches.
Yeah, Keskitalo, it was really, really good to have you to discuss about, to have these discussions, not just to hear for you to share your thoughts on these issues that we talked about, but also to actually explain to us how these things are being applied here. So I'm so pleased that you were able to make out this time. So thank you for joining us.